Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another one. How are you, my friend?
Doing well. We today's the first day of the soft launch, as I'm calling it, of the Patreon that we started up. Like we said, it'll officially go live on Monday as far as like perks going into effect. But people
are when this episode is released.
Right. This will be released on Monday. My bad. People have signed up already as early as Wednesday evening, which is great. So thanks to everybody who's signed up so far, and we hope more of you follow suit. But we're excited, and this, I guess, will be kind of the transitionary episode of in between our Patreon and non-Patreon eras.
Yeah, I think that's well said. It's patreon.com/The Metal Exchange Podcast. Obviously, the links are in the description below. But we are very, very excited for this launch, and we thank everyone for their participation and for their support. But as always, lots of new stuff that seems to be coming out at a clip faster than I can listen to it. But a couple of things I definitely wanted to mention. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to the whole thing. I know that you put one of their songs on your new playlist, which we'll get to in a second. But after what can only be described as a long hiatus, Ne Obliviscaris from Australia has released their new album, and I feel like this has been long overdue, and it's kind of one of those albums that people have been clamoring for many years. The album is called Exul, E-X-U-L. There's 6 songs, but it comes in at about 53 minutes in typical fashion from these guys, as they often write some long epics. I like the album quite a bit. I need a lot more time with it. I think I've only listened to it twice so far. But these guys are they're such good songwriters, but their stuff is all over the place. So it's not like something that's easily accessible. I'm curious to know if you had a chance to listen to it or just one or two songs from it.
So far, I've only listened to Grawl, which I believe is the first of a couple of singles that they released. Mm-hmm. And like you'd mentioned, it's going to be on my Volume 7 playlist. I just posted it today on our Spotify. I think it's something that it's probably going to take me a few listens, but I do think it's something I'm going to enjoy once I dig into the rest of the album. It is definitely on my list. I just had some stuff going on with work this week, so really the only thing I really had a chance to listen to is this Unchosen One album that we're going to talk about. But I did have a chance to also listen to the new Angus McSix single called Six Caliber. And man, like I said about the first single, as much as I want to hate this because of how stupid the name is, this is another really good tune. And I think the fact that he's working with one of the guys from Orden Ogan is making for a good combo because it's actually... So far, I have to say I've enjoyed these 2 singles so far, and I really was kind of ready to write it off because of how dumb the name was. Maybe it'll just reach a point where it's been around for so long that we don't think twice about it anymore. Like X-Pac. I remember the first time I heard his name was going to be X-Pac, I thought it was the stupidest thing ever, and now it's just you don't even think twice.
Kind of rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. Other than that, though, I think anything else that that's on this playlist, I probably mentioned last week or in previous weeks. But a lot of good stuff, a lot of meat on the bone, as we say. I'm looking forward to digging into some of the albums that came out last week, and as well as or I should say, I guess 2 weeks ago, and then last week, the Ad Infinitum, their third album, also came out. So all things on my radar. Just I'm a little backlogged with some work stuff going on, but I should be catching up soon, and then I will catch you up on how my feelings on said albums.
Fair enough. I just have 2 other things that I wanted to mention. The band False Memories out of Milan, Italy, released a new single called Rising Tide. It's on Frontiers, so that should give you an idea as to at least what it might sound like. Pretty good stuff from this band. I think this is a band that
might be melodic.
It very well might be. Good stuff. I think that it's a single worth checking out. I'll probably post it this week. And one other album, which is kind of a little off the beaten path in many ways, and that's the new Floor Jansen album. It's her solo album called Paragon. It's about 10 tracks, not at all sounding like Nightwish. I think it's more along the lines of like a pop rock album or very, very interesting. A very easy listen, and obviously her voice is great, so she could sing a phone book, and I probably enjoy it, except for Human. But that being said, it's just a very easy listen, and something I think I will find myself going back to, if for no other reason than it's just like perfect background music when you're working.
Yeah, this is also on my list of albums. I have listened to a handful of the singles, and it is it's enjoyable hearing her do something else that's not Nightwish. Because I mentioned more than once and on this podcast that like I always wondered what Eric Adams would sound like if he did something other than Manowar, and I'm glad that with Floor we don't have to kind of wonder about like what would Floor be like. And Sharon Denadel of Within Temptation did something not terribly dissimilar a couple of years ago with the My Indigo project, and it's that kind of stuff that I enjoy to see artists kind of branching out from just metal or what we're used to hearing from them and doing something maybe a little bit different. So yeah, definitely looking forward to hearing that. Like you said, like I would gladly listen to Floor sing just about anything. So
nice. I completely agree. And I guess that kind of brings us full circle to where we are today after having requests for the first Monday of just about every month since we've been doing the podcast. We figured we would end the non-Patreon era with something a little bit different. This didn't come from a listener. This came from the band themselves. They had sent us a copy of their promo. They asked us to, give it a listen and kind of share our thoughts. And I said, you know what? I listened to a song or two, and I'm like, you know what? This is enough. This is good enough that I think it's worth a full episode on. And so we're going to talk about the Unchosen Ones and their brand new album, which, quite frankly, I don't think it comes out for another couple of weeks, if I'm not mistaken. So we're a little, we've done contemporary albums, and obviously we often focus on albums from the past. But this one we're going to kind of do a little bit ahead of the game, if you will, because Sorrow Turns to Dust doesn't come out for another couple of weeks. I think it comes out on the 21st of April, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that is true, and we thank them for reaching out to us. I guess we kind of opened the Pandora's box here, but I guess if we listen to something and one or two tracks stand out to us, I mean, the last thing I want to do is review, like have somebody request that we do their album and then we end up just completely panning it. I mean, if we kind of know from the get-go that maybe it's not something we're going to love, maybe we'll, spare everyone's feelings and move on. But in this case, I think we both thought that this was something that would be up both of our alleys. So it seemed like a safe bet.
Yeah, I agree. And to be fair, we've gotten a lot of requests, and we get a lot of stuff sent to us. So thank you for everyone that sends their stuff over. But to be honest, I just had a feeling like this one was going to kind of hit the mark, especially for you. So I'm glad that we had a chance to cover it. And, that's not to say that we won't do this again, but I don't think we're going to turn this into a contemporary review show, because there's a lot of podcasts out there that kind of do that thing, and that's not the format we want to go in. But it is nice to sprinkle in something new every now and again. So that's, thank you to these guys. And for those that don't know, this is their first full-length album. They classify themselves as a melodic heavy metal band, and they were formed in 2020, and they are out of Spain. So, with that backdrop, this album has about 11 tracks, clocks in at, just about 44 minutes. So it's a pretty short and easy listen, in my opinion. The pacing on this is pretty quick, and there's no 12-minute epic that kind of slogs the album down. It's you're pretty much in, you're out, and you and you're on to something else. I'm curious, before we kind of break down the band and give a little more details about these guys, What were your initial impressions the first time that you played it? Just broadly speaking.
I just thought it was a really solid kind of, melodic power metal kind of style album. I thought the vocalist kind of gave me some Georg Neuhauser vibes from Serenity.
Could not agree more.
I actually sent a track to Mike Crea, and he said that it kind of made him think of Stradivarius, but with Pelike singing, which I thought was an interesting way of putting it. But yeah, I thought it was solid. I knew it was something that, based on the content and also the length, that it was going to be very easily digestible, and it was.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And so, for those that don't know, they came out with an EP in 2021 called "Kill the Night." This, obviously, like I said, is their first full-length release. It's Christian Marco on keyboards, Francisco Romero on guitars, Jose Fernandez on drums, Javier Calderon on vocals, and Pablo Alvarez on bass. And it was not only recorded by themselves, but I believe that they also mixed and mastered it themselves too. So it should be it was an interesting listen, because sometimes when you do things all in-house, I have reservations sometimes about what it's going to sound like. But I thought that sonically, the album was actually pretty good for a debut, and I feel like it'll only get better with subsequent releases.
Yeah, I thought the production was very solid. I didn't even realize that it was self-produced. It's funny because we recently had a similar discussion with our friend Johannes from Skyblazer, talking about how he pretty much self-produced his debut album, and I guess we're kind of living in that era where guys can be self-taught and figure out how to do this thing on their own, and it's cool. Like much like I thought Johannes's album, I thought the production was quite good. I thought the production on this was really, really well done as well. I thought it was interesting. I'm reading their, they provided us a little bit of a bio, with the whole, package that they provided for us, and it's interesting because they say that it's a tribute and a little twist to the great heavy and power metal bands of the late 90s and adapted to the current times. And I think that's a really apt way of describing this, because it really did kind of give me that vibe of like that late 90s, early 2000s kind of European style, power metal. And, it kind of gave me like a little bit of some Secret Sphere feels, like that kind of, that kind of like Mediterranean power metal, if that's a genre. I guess it is now.
It is now.
Yeah. And I also was interested to find that their lyrics are inspired by video games such as Elden Ring, which is, only a year old. So that it's showing how modern the lyrical content is. That song Infinite Gear was inspired from Elden Ring. The song Kill the Night from Castlevania, and the song Ashen Wasteland from the game Dark Souls. But they also cover other themes like anxiety, sadness, or the search for inner strength to deal with it all. And who can't level with that? I mean, that when it comes to my life, video games and anxiety take up a solid portion of it. So
with this podcast taking the rest, I'm going to hijack the episode for a second. Have you ever played Elden Ring?
Funny story is that I bought it when it came out because it was all everybody was talking about, and I played it for like 10 minutes, and I'm like, I should probably play Dark Souls first. Like, I am not, this whole world is just not like something I'm used to, this ultra difficult combat, whatever. So I started playing Dark Souls because I had it for the Switch, and I got fairly far into it, but then just got super frustrated with the difficulty level of it all, and and just like the boss battles were just so harsh, and the whole idea is that you're supposed to just keep doing it until you get really good. And I'm like, I'm too old. I don't have the time or patience for this. So I kind of lost interest, and I never really went back to Elden Ring for that reason. Although I understand the difficulty level is not quite as harsh as Dark Souls is, but the the gameplay is supposed to be very similar, just set in a like a big open world and more of an RPG, a traditional RPG open world kind of style. But I think I'm probably going to stick to the new Legend of Zelda game when it comes out in May. So, but I don't know. I do own the game, so maybe I'll pick it up and give it a go at some point. But currently, I'm playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City, so modern games clearly aren't a big priority for me at this moment.
I'm playing Breath of Fire 3, so we can all go back in time.
Perfect.
I think part of the reason that I'm playing Breath of Fire is because I tried playing Elden Ring. And I got to be honest with you, I think I played for about an hour. And like I was kind of doing okay. And then I took a wrong turn. And I got the shit kicked out of me. And I don't know what happened because it was like I just kind of went to the next room or the next natural extension of where I was going to go. And then I realized I'm not supposed to fight this beast at this point because the thing just absolutely destroyed me. So I started playing again. I didn't go that way, and I just had regular knights coming up and ganging up on me. I'm like, I'm not cut out for this because I clearly lack enough patience to play this game the right way, where I'm trying to just hack and slash my way through, and they hacked and slashed their way through me. So I'm going to go back to it, but I have to be in the right headspace, and quite frankly, I wasn't then, and I'm certainly not now. So I'll just play RPGs from 1998. I guess that's where we're at this point.
There you go. I mean, oddly enough, another game that I mentioned that, they were inspired by was Castlevania, and I just started playing this game called Nine Years of Shadows, which was a something that I did a Kickstarter for 3 years ago this month, and I just forgot about it. And because it's, I haven't done a ton of Kickstarters for video games as much as I have with bands and music. And with bands and music, you're usually getting a return on your investment within like a year, maybe a year and a half. But games take a long time to develop. This is a first time outing for this company in Mexico. And this game is a love letter to Symphony of the Night or any of your great Metroidvanias. And it just out of nowhere, they were just like, it's out on Steam. So I switched my pledge from Switch to Steam so I could play it on the Steam Deck, and it's a lot of fun. If you're into that kind of 2D like exploration Metroid / Castlevania type game, it's really cool. So I guess I lied. I am playing at least one thing that's so modern that it came out like less than a week ago.
Less than a week ago, but inspired on something from 25 years ago. So there you go.
And it's also, to tie it back into music, it's the soundtrack was done by, at least partially by the composer for Symphony of the Night, as well as there were 3 composers that worked together on it. One of them was from who had experience with the Mega Man soundtrack, and another one was Michiru Yamane, who she was the Symphony of the Night composer and also did several other Castlevania soundtracks. So the music is definitely a high point as well. And one of the perks of the Kickstarter was that I would get a copy of the soundtrack. So I'm looking forward to digging into that as well. So how about that for a sidebar?
There you go. Join the Patreon. You can hear more of these discussions at your leisure, but I digress. As you listen to this album for the first time, I think that you're kind of going back to what you said. The late 90s, early 2000s power metal is on full display, but it's not a complete ripoff. I didn't feel like I was listening to Accent Star or anything like that. I felt like it was its own fresh take on those sounds. So I think as we go through the songs, I have a lot of influences that I'll mention throughout, but at the same time, I think that it's not a direct copy where in certain cases you can actually just hear a direct ripoff of certain bands. Here it's really more just a tribute to or just drawing inspiration from. And we might as well just jump into it. The album kicks off with your typical, I guess, power metal standard for an opening track, and it's called Far Beyond the Thunderdome. It starts off with this keyboard intro, which I thought was a nice way to start the album. If there was any doubt that keyboards were going to play a major role on this thing, that was removed within the first 5 seconds. And then it gives way to this like really chunky power metal riff. But what jumped out to me more than anything is how melodic it was. And I have to say the keyboards that are throughout this whole album really just add a very, very nice element here. And I had a Twilightning feel on this track. And as you know from my review of Delirium Veil that we covered a couple of months ago, or many months ago now, one of my favorite power metal albums of all time. So if you're drawing a comparison to those guys, you're doing something right in my book. And I thought the singer's range was actually quite good on this. I wasn't sure what to expect. I'm not going to say that he's Michael Kiske, but Javier Calderon's vocals are very, very good. I think it's a solid opening track. Nothing that you haven't heard before, but it's just a well-done version of stuff you've heard before.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite songs that I heard on the album. It also happened to be the first one that I listened to because I was like, all right, let me give one song a chance. And this was the one I think that they released as a single or a music video or a lyric video, something like that. And just so happened to be the first song. But I thought it was really good, a really solid way to just kick things off. You could tell that the band was started by a keyboard player and a drummer because the drums and keyboards are right on display right from the get-go. But, it sounds like right away we're dealing with people that are all very adept at their individual instrument / voice. But yeah, this was a really solid tune, and I definitely can pick up that Twilightning vibe as well. Just it's kind of a mid to fast paced power metal song with the keyboards kind of painting the picture along the way. But yeah, solid stuff. I knew once I heard that song, I was like, all right, this definitely is not going to be a difficult listen by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and I think that's on full display in the second track, The World Is Ours to Take. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to guess this is your song of the week. And the reason I say that is it's a touch slower, obviously in a similar vein as compared to the first track. But number one, the dual guitars are on full display throughout the whole thing, including the instrumental section. The vocal lines are very melodic, and I just got a real sense of Power Quest on this song. So when I heard that, I'm like, Chris is going to absolutely fall in love with this track. I think it's a bit straightforward, but I thought that the melodies and the construction of the song just screamed Power Quest. So I trust that you love this one.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take. I think you're right. There is definitely a Power Quest kind of vibe to it as far as like maybe one of their more mid-tempo songs. It's actually not my song of the week. I kind of chose my song of the week based on the song that got stuck in my head the most. So, okay. And I'll point it out when we get to it. But this was another really good song, and I think it stood out from the first track. I thought it was important that the first two tracks weren't too similar because you don't want to like start becoming, redundant or repetitive right off the bat. And I thought that this was another solid tune. Did you find that Javier's vocals reminded you of anyone? I had mentioned earlier that it reminded me a bit of Georg from Serenity. But I think depending on the parts, that it's not always that. I definitely, for whatever reason, got a bit of a Secret Sphere vibe as well, like I'd mentioned earlier.
On this particular track, no. But as we get into Infinite Gear, I completely hear the Georg Neuhauser comparison. I actually have that in my notes. I completely agree when it comes to Infinite Gear. I have some thoughts about this, but I want to hear your thoughts first. What did you think about this third track, Infinite Gear?
It kind of it reminded me, yeah, again, like I felt it had kind of this almost like crunchier version of Serenity kind of vibe to it.
Couldn't agree more. I think you're spot on.
Yeah, I mean the vocals obviously, but I think the rest of the music
too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's which is interesting because I'm pretty sure Serenity wasn't around in the late 90s. So, but that being said, I mean, this is another really good tune, another kind of mid-tempo, almost kind of marchy kind of tune. yeah, the vocals are a real strong point, I think, for this band. I think he just sounds really really clear, and I just think even though it's similar to Georg's vocals, I think it's not like, it's not like listening to was it Savage Circus and thinking that you're listening to Blind Guardian. It's not as much of a tribute, so to speak. He has his own voice, and it's really good, really solid. But yeah, this is another good tune. I have to say, I didn't dislike any songs on this album.
I think of the first three, this is probably my favorite. It's slower, it's heavy, and it has almost like a tinge of an industrial sound in spots. I think the way it's, the way the guitars are tuned. I definitely hear Serenity on this track as well. As I mentioned, I loved how the guitar and the keyboard play like the same solo at the same time. They almost mimic each other during the instrumental section. To be honest with you, that main riff really just drives the entire song, and I thought it was a really good riff. Of the first three, it's my favorite, and I thought it stands in stark contrast to the Elden Ring theme, because I can't stand the game, but I thought the song was really good. And then we get to the title track, Sorrow Turns to Dust. When it first starts with the keyboards, I thought this was going to be a true ballad, of which there really isn't one until the very end, and even that is not a true ballad. It's more of a power ballad. But this particular song is really just another mid-paced hard rocker, and it has like a modern Sonata Arctica vibe to it. It doesn't remind me of Ecliptica or any of their old stuff, ironically, from the late 90s, but it reminds me of like the more modern sounding Sonata Arctica stuff. I wouldn't classify it as power metal. I think it's more of just like melodic hard rock, but the keys had a Vision Divine feel to me, and I actually got a real sense of that early Vision Divine stuff. We spoke with Olaf Thorsen not so long ago. This brought me right back to the first time I heard that Vision Divine album, the self-titled debut. It's not my favorite track. I think it's a little too vanilla for me, but the keyboard solo was awesome, and I do think that there are certain elements of this that stood out.
If they need a label, they might want to send this song over to Frontiers.
Yeah.
The tone of the piano, or I'm sure it's keyboard meant to sound like piano at the beginning, made me think of "Glory to the Brave" by Hammerfall. That kind of sound, but then the song goes into something that would be nothing like "Glory to the Brave," as this is kind of a more upbeat and not as much of a ballad. But yeah, another really solid tune. One of the things I like about this album on a whole is that we talk a lot about keyboard based power metal bands that kind of have a upbeat vibe, and we've talked about Power Quest and Freedom Call and even things as recently as Skyblazer. This, while it is very keyboard driven, it has more of a darker kind of sense to it. It's not as happy. And I guess when you're dealing with, things like the nature of anxiety and sadness, and just naming these games that are just kind of dark in nature, Castlevania and Dark Souls and Elden Ring, these are not like real thematically upbeat games. So it kind of makes sense. It kind of matches the vibe of the inspiration. So,
did you find that difficult? Because I know you often gravitate towards that happier sound.
No, I liked it. I think it's nice to not always listen to the same thing, and I think that it works. I feel like I would get bored if everybody made a Majestica like album. It's cool to have something with a little bit more. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. A little more darkness, I guess, would be the easiest way to put it.
Interesting. The fifth track is called The Accursed Moon, and it's kind of, I call it like a transitional track. It starts off almost like a battle scene in a movie, and it's very heavy on the orchestration. I think more so than any other track on the album by quite a large margin. But it really winds up being just a short instrumental track leading into a song called Kill the Night. Do you have any thoughts on The Accursed Moon, or anything stand out to you?
I mean, I got kind of another Castlevania vibe from that, and I guess that makes sense because the following song is in fact the song that was inspired by Castlevania. So this kind of feels like it is a bit of an intro to that, but I could definitely see this fitting right in on a Castlevania game or a game like Castlevania, like a Bloodstained or what have you. And then it goes into Kill the Night, which right off the bat we got that really dark bass sound that
almost ominous sounding, right?
Yeah,
like haunting.
Reminded me a bit of like older Metallica bass. What else does it? Trying to remember what reminds me a little bit of the bass at the beginning of Glass Prison by Dream Theater, kind of that slow and foreboding.
Good word.
And then it kind of like kicks in, like the guitars jump in, the keys jump in. It's kind of like that slow build. This kind of gave me a bit of a Power Quest vibe as well. Once it got going, like one of their more mid-tempo songs. I think of like Edge of Time, that kind of pace. But another cool song. I think now that I know that it was inspired by Castlevania, it gives a whole nother element to it.
Yeah, it's funny because before I had read the inspiration, I got horror movie vibes out of this track, just of how kind of dark and foreboding, as you said, how it starts. But it really transitions into a straight up power metal tune, but a dark power metal tune. Awesome drum fills, really nice keyboards, and what I thought to be kind of an emotional vocal performance on this track. What immediately jumped out to me was that if I was going to see the band live, I think this would be one of the top 2 or 3 tracks that I would want to see them play. Really, really enjoyable. And by the end, I kind of found myself moving my head to the beat, like I was kind of getting into it. I thought it ended really strong.
Yeah, I agree 100% on all of those points. Very good tune. I feel like really, I think all the songs so far have been very good. It's really solid so far. Tell me your thoughts on Too Late.
This song is maybe the heaviest one so far. It almost has like a thrashy sound to it, like not quite as heavy as like a Creator or a Sodom or something like that, but it just has a thrashy vibe to it. I don't think the verses are anything special. They're kind of mundane for me, but the chorus is quite catchy, and the vocal lines mirror the guitar riff, which I thought was a really nice touch in spots. It's well placed. It's a nondescript, but it's a good song. And again, I get a strong Georg Neuhauser vibe from the vocals on this particular track. All in all, a good tune, but well placed in the middle of the album. We were towards the end.
I noticed very fearsome double bass drums on this one. Jose Fernandez not holding back here. But again, another like really heavily keyboard driven song. Probably towards the back end of my songs that I enjoyed on this album. And like I said before, I didn't think there were any bad songs. I just think this one was not my favorite compared to some of the other ones, but still pretty solid. I don't have much else to add that you hadn't already mentioned.
Well, now we get to a really interesting track, which is called Shadow Dancer. This one stood out to me for a lot of different reasons. It starts off with this nice crunchy riff, but it gave me a late 80s radio vibe, like one of those metal songs that you would have heard on the radio in 1989 or something like that. And the keyboards just screamed Ozzy to me, like that Mr. Crowley type of vibe or something like that. And to be honest with you, in my opinion, this, if it isn't, it could have or should have been the single. It's very melodic, the verses, and the chorus just as solid. I love the way this is constructed, and it kind of gave me like an 80s movie vibe to it. And then like the last 30 seconds, the guitar solo is my favorite guitar solo on the entire album. I thought the way this ended was fantastic. And this was by far the most memorable of the tracks. I loved it, and I'll make it my song of the week. So let's give it a listen, and then I'm dying to hear your thoughts. This, again, for those that don't know, this is Shadow Dancer.
Surrounded by fire, as the ashes of future steals your breath, no place to be sheltered from the blaze of the faceless chase of death, and we fire on the stars, guide the forever chosen. Whoa, and eternally born as he casts down the sky. Whoa. In the eye of the storm, the rain makes the falling, the shadows are hunting. In the night, there's nowhere to run, there's no place to hide.
You know, it's funny. We post our songs of the week on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I don't even know if the song has been released. We may have problems posting our songs of the week for an album that hasn't come out yet. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But talk to me about Shadow Dancer. What are your thoughts on this one?
I hadn't even considered that. That's kind of funny. Yeah, this is another solid tune. The for whatever reason, that whole keyboard like driving sound that kind of guides the music along really reminds me a lot of Power Quest, who I just think was just one of the best bands when it came to that sound, but just like we mentioned before, in a more like darker kind of way. It's a really interesting take on that kind of style, just done darker, and I love that because I love the sound of a keyboard. It's not a perfect analogy, but the I get a little bit of a Beast in Black kind of flavor too, especially that beginning part, like you said, that kind of has an 80s hard rock kind of vibe, and I mean that's
which a lot of their songs have that.
Yeah, and Beast in Black pretty much that's their bread and butter.
Part. Yeah,
yeah. So I think while not like hitting you over the head with it, like I feel like it's very subtle, but it does make me think of Beast in Black, who is one of my favorite newer metal bands,
and a band that I'm sure we will be covering as we get closer to Prog Power, because I've yet to see them live and we've yet to talk about them in detail, so I look forward to that.
Yes.
Little sneak preview there, but talk to me about Ashen Wasteland, which is the 9th track. This has certain elements that we've talked about with many songs in the past, and I'm curious to see if you heard the same thing.
Well, this is my song of the week, and reason being is that I found the chorus to be just constantly stuck in my head. I've been listening to this album on headphones at night, laying in bed while playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and watching hockey and or wrestling in the background, just trying to, get as much done at one time as humanly possible. And this was the one that just like I would hear that I just hear that chorus again and again in my head. It's I think that it has it's probably one of the faster tunes on the album, which probably was one of the reasons that it that I was drawn to it. But yeah, I'm curious what it made you think of. But all I can say is that it just I guess maybe Twilightning again. But I found it to be the song that just kept this and the opening track. Those two songs just kept popping back into my head.
Well, let's give it a listen, and then I'll kind of come back with some of my thoughts. Here's Ashen Wasteland.
Million pieces before me. Now the wall
I think of all the tracks on the album, this one more than any had that Metal Exchange gallop that we talk about. It had this galloping feel to it. But in terms of a comparison, to me, it reminded me of turn of the century Jag Panzer, which is pretty funny. But like, I got a real Jag Panzer vibe from this. I thought that the guitar, especially like in the guitar riffs and the solos, it just screamed Jag Panzer, who's, in many ways, I guess, an American power metal band. But I can see why you liked it. It's short. It's just a short, enjoyable banger, and the drums were really, really tight. A good song. I certainly appreciate why you liked it. And as we kind of get towards the end of this album, two kind of interesting tracks to end it, in my opinion. The Call of the Rain, just based on the title, I thought this was going to be a ballad because we hadn't heard one yet, but it's not. It's a more of a mid-paced tune with this like groovy melodic guitar riff. I didn't love this song on the album. I thought the chorus was catchy and it was melodic. Definitely the highlight of the song. And although it grew on me, I thought it would be better served live. For some reason, it just didn't care for it so much the first listen or the second listen. I think by the end, I warmed up to it a bit. There's just enough to keep the listener engaged, but it's something I'd also rather see live. What about you?
All fair critiques. What was I going to say? Another kind of just, I don't know why, but just reminded me of Secret Sphere, like just that kind of like late 90s, early 2000s, like Italian, Mediterranean power metal trademark. That we're going to put that on a shirt with the Metal Exchange Gallop. Like a Four Horsemen shirt.
I like it.
But yeah, I'm with you. It wasn't. It was kind of also on the back end of my favorite songs on the album. Solid, but if not, unremarkable, I guess would be the word I'm looking for.
And we wrap up with a song called True Warrior. So you kind of know this is going to go in one or two different directions. Talk to me about this track and your thoughts on how the album ends.
Yeah, this song actually, whereas the one before didn't quite sound like a Hammerfall ballad, this one kind of did.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
But I thought it was solid, and I think it was also good that there was one song like this on the album, because it kind of felt like the one thing that was kind of missing. So now you have this power ballad that's again very keyboard driven and very very emotional and heartfelt, and I thought it was a really solid way to finish a really solid debut album by a band that I think we're both going to be keeping an eye on going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because it starts off with like a guitar solo, but in many ways it's really just an extended vocal solo for the first half of the song. And I kept thinking to myself, like, when is the payoff? I was waiting for the payoff on this track, and it came about midway through, and it's very melodic, but just a little repetitive for my taste. I didn't know that anything except for like the last guitar solo stood out to me, although it was probably my second favorite guitar solo on the album. So it does end well. The album definitely needed a track like this, and I thought it was good. I don't know that I would call it great. But what I can say is the album needed it. It was a good way to end it. And I think more than anything, I think that like you can see a ton of potential here. This is a band that you have to keep an eye on because as the songwriting matures, they have the chops to pull it off. So I think that it really all depends on how the songwriting continues to, grow and mature over time, because for a debut, it was very well done. I just don't want to hear the same exact thing with the next album. No pressure.
Sure. The keys towards the end of the song kind of reminded me a little bit of that kind of Lost Horizon trademark,
Nice.
Almost like that bell sounding kind of keyboard that not a lot of bands tend to use. So like I think in retrospect, it kind of became like a Lost Horizon kind of thing, and I kind of caught that really in like just that last minute or so of that song. But yeah, I think your overall thoughts on this are pretty much on par with mine. I'd be willing to bet that we gave this a very similar ranking.
And to that end, scale of 1 to 10, what are you giving this debut album?
I'm going to give it a 7.0. I thought it was very solid, with I think a lot of room to grow. This band will have, but I mean, really solid, debut album, and I'm glad that they reached out and had us listen to it, because I'm really not sure. I don't know if this would have at least passed by to me otherwise. So
with so many albums coming out, and kind of a limited time to check things out. Obviously I try to check out as much as I can, but to your point, I don't know that this would have ever gotten on my radar. So we appreciate you guys sending it over to us. I'm with you with the score. It is a 7.0, but it's, a better than average album that I really enjoyed, and I look forward to hearing more from these guys. I think that the potential is very high, and you don't want to start talking about next albums when this album hasn't even come out yet. But obviously, you have to look ahead, and for a debut, I've heard a lot of albums that don't, that couldn't cut the mustard when you compare it to this. So, very good stuff. Thanks to the guys from the Unchosen Ones. We appreciate it. I
gotta give credit where credit is due. Like, to reach out to like podcasts and really kind of promote yourself in that sort of way. I think that shows a lot of a lot of gumption, to use an old.
I was
going
to say moxie, but okay,
a lot of moxie. Cheers to them for just going out and just pushing their material and being confident in it, and not being I don't think that they were worried that we were going to rip it apart. Perhaps they heard the podcast and knew this was something that would probably be up our alley. So I think that was a ballsy thing to do, and I think it's going to pay off for them if they've reached out to others to cover this album. So I wish them all the best. This was really just an enjoyable, nice, something different to do. And, I have a feeling we might do it again in the future, perhaps, because this was a cool experience, especially after we've really been lately sticking to like albums from the early 90s into like, I mean, Terrio was one of the more recent albums we've done in the last few weeks, and that album came out over 20 years ago. So it's sometimes it's nice to get back into the modern day swing of things.
100% agree.
Which we're not going to be doing next week, by the way.
Oh, were we going back to Beethoven? Before we get there, just a couple of quick news items on what was otherwise kind of a slow news week. Jason Bieler and Jeff Scott Soto are going out on tour. They have a handful of dates throughout the month of May, and I was excited to see that they're playing New York City on a Friday night, May 26th. I'm going to go out of my way to go see this show. I thoroughly enjoyed their performance on the Saturday morning of Prague Power last year. I thought that it was the perfect complement of entertainment, music, and comedy, really, in all in the same show. So kudos to those guys. I would love to have either one of them on the show. We'll make every effort to have that happen during the course of 2022. But this is a cool tour. I know that
go read the press release if you haven't, because the self pity and the self whatever you want to call it, the non self adulation is hilarious.
And really, I can relate because I have the same humor. So it
sounded like something we would write about ourselves, quite frankly.
100%. And something that you brought to my attention earlier today. The Power Trip Festival, which is taking place in Indio, California, the first weekend in October. I'm just going to mention the headliners for this, and then I have a question for you. Friday night, headliners, Guns N' Roses and Iron Maiden. The second night, AC/DC, and coming out of retirement, Ozzy Osbourne. And on Sunday night, Metallica and Tool. I am at a loss for words as to what is going on at the top of this festival, and also how much this festival is going to cost to put on with those 6 acts headlining. My question for you is, if you had to pick a night to go based on those 6 bands, which night would you go see and why?
I just have to say, Ozzy Osbourne is making Terry Funk blush on the amount of time it took him to come out of retirement. When I saw the lineup, I thought it was like a typo, or somebody made
or
it
a
like
festival from 40 years ago.
I thought it was or just a joke. Or somebody was just trying to trick people, and it was just like a fake lineup or whatever. I'm like, didn't we talk on this podcast about Ozzy retiring?
Yes.
Not that long ago, but
for the 5th time since we started the podcast. I feel like this is a recurring joke now.
For me, I would. It would probably be Friday night. I've never seen Guns N' Roses live, and I hear they're phenomenal. And there's never a bad time to see Iron Maiden, as we've spoken about in the past. I will say though, if it were like 25 years ago, I might have gone with Saturday night with AC/DC and Ozzy. With both of the vocalists of those bands being a little bit more in their prime, or even still in the band. In AC/DC's case, do we know, is Axl Rose still doing the vocals for AC/DC at this point? Or
I don't know, and that obviously kind of weighs into my decision for the same question. I have seen every band on this list, but I've never seen. Well, I never saw Ozzy solo. I did see him with Black Sabbath, but I've never seen AC/DC. And I got to be honest with you, I feel like I missed the boat on that one. But I would love to see AC/DC. And so, just being spoiled, having seen the other bands, I think I would probably go with Saturday. I've never seen Ozzy solo. I've never seen AC/DC. And although I have either varying degrees of love or complete and total fanboy for the other 4 bands, I probably go Saturday just for something different and to check AC/DC off the bucket list.
Yeah, like I said, if it was 25 years earlier, I think it'd be a much tougher choice to make. Do we know if this is the lineup, or will there be other bands playing, or is this it? Is it just these 6 bands?
I can't imagine. Well, you know what? I shouldn't say that. I have no idea. I just feel bad for whoever is playing, playing this festival and deciding, that they have to go on before Guns N' Roses and Iron Maiden. I mean, good luck. That's all I can say.
You know who would be up for it? Sabaton.
Listen, they would go in there guns blazing, no pun intended, and they would give it their best. But you got to bring your A game if you're going to go on before these guys. Part of me thinks that they will do co-headlining sets and there's just no opener because, if each between the layover and everything else, you're talking about, 4 or 5 hours just with those 2 bands each night, right? If each band plays for an hour and a half or 2 hours, a half an hour or 45-minute layover, and then the next band, I mean, you're getting your money's worth, although tickets are prohibitively expensive to this thing.
Yeah, I feel like for the same amount of money, you could probably go see 60 bands on 70,000 tons of metal instead of these 6.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and I will be doing that. So I could totally relate.
If this was an East Coast thing, I maybe would consider it, but the fact that it would also mean taking a trip to California, I think that totally puts it out of reach, at least for me personally. But it's very interesting because you don't really see anything like this in the US that I could think of in recent times with this kind of heavy hitters as far as hard rock goes.
No, you kind of see it with a Rock in Rio or something like that, but you don't really get this so much here. And even the big festivals like a Bonnaroo or something like that, AC/DC is not headlining that kind of festival. So in many ways it is one of a kind, but they are swinging for the fences. But if you look at some of the bands that played the last time, I think that there was a similar festival in 2016. And check this out. The Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, Paul McCartney, Neil Young, Roger Waters, and The Who. It was basically like the rockers of the generation before this, all on the same bill, but all the guys from the 60s and 70s. So, like, really cool concept. I had a friend of mine that went to that Desert Trip Festival, and she said it was phenomenal. And then this is obviously, I guess, the next wave. I'm assuming the 90s version will be like Pearl Jam, Green Day, the second coming of Nirvana with Kurt Cobain. I mean, who the hell knows? But that's what you're kind of looking at.
Yeah, that one I might go to.
Yeah, I like it. But with
as long as Cracker's on the lineup, you can count me in.
I'm sure there'll be headlining.
Cracker and Toad the Wet Sprocket.
They're playing the pre-show on Thursday, but I digress. I feel like you haven't picked an album in a while. I picked Terrier last week. Obviously, this was a request. What are we listening to next week?
So, you know, I wanted to go with something that was a little bit easier because it seems like I am going on a trip all the time nowadays, but yet again, I'm going on another trip. So I kind of wanted to make it easy. And so I decided to look through our past episodes, look at bands that we've done before, but have only done once. And that's kind of similar to how I came up with Manowar's Triumph of Steel a few weeks back. This time, we're going to go back to Ed Guy and talk about Vainglory Opera, which came out 1998, the year before Theater of Salvation, which was the first Ed Guy album that we discussed all the way back on May 24th, 2021, so almost 2 years ago. Was the last time we spoke about Ed Guy in long form, but this album has always been in the back of my head, and what kind of all the things, what kind of brought it back to the front of my brain was when I was editing the Patreon episode of the podcast. I had used I Can by Halloween as the intro, and it just made me think of MVP making his entrance in Ralph's basement, and his opponent would come out to the opening track from Vainglory Opera, and for whatever reason, that whole scene, maybe we'll post it to see what the hell it is we're talking about.
Better raise the tears if you're going to put that out in public domain,
yeah,
but I digress.
I know, I want to embarrass myself to a level of that degree. But anyway, all I can picture is that song playing and Mike coming out in his silver cape. Oh my God. Well, anyway,
if you don't know, and you probably don't know,
yeah, you're
maybe better
off, probably.
Yeah, but great choice. I look forward to Vainglory Opera. I haven't listened to this album in a long time. I know it well, but it's been a long time since I've listened to it. I'm curious to see if it holds up. So, excellent choice. I like it.
Yeah, there was a couple other bands that definitely stood out to me that we've only talked about once. So it's kind of refilling the coffers in my mind of stuff we could talk about. There's just
plenty we haven't talked about.
I'm sorry?
And plenty we haven't talked about.
Yeah. Just there's just this never-ending plethora of things to talk about, which is why the entire theme of this podcast is so great, because we could do thousands of episodes, and there's just always something to talk about, including that hip hop album that's yet to be named that we're going to discuss at some point.
Oh, I can't wait. The Chronic Calls, but I digress. Great choice. Look forward to talking about it next week. Enjoy your trip. We will probably post that episode Sunday night for our Patreon fans. Otherwise, it'll come out probably Monday morning, barring any issues with the trip. But we thank you for listening. We invite you to join the Patreon, and appreciate the support. If nothing else, please leave us a positive review if you think we deserve it. It certainly helps other people find the show. So help screw up that algorithm so that other people can see it. We appreciate it. Enjoy the week, my friend. I will talk to you soon.
Yep, and thanks again to everybody that checked out the Patreon a little bit early, and we hope you continue to consider subscribing. We're really excited about it and definitely have some cool stuff in the works. So thanks again, and take care.
My soul.